Well, Psycho is my first attempt at a shocker. In other words, it has in its content certain episodes which do shock. In some sense it could be called a horror film, but the horror only comes to you after you've seen it, when you get home in the dark. How does one describe drama? Drama is life with the dull bits cut out.
The slasher genre didn't emerge fully formed. Before Michael, Jason, and Freddy became the faces of horror, the seeds of the slasher were being planted in the shadows of early cinema. From the psychological thrillers of the 1960s to the gory experimental films of the 1970s, the slasher evolved through trial and innovation, building on the fears and fascinations of its time. In this episode of Slashers Unmasked, we'll go back to the beginning, exploring the films that laid the foundation for this iconic genre. Welcome to the Slasher Origins. It's impossible to talk about the birth of the slasher without starting with Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. While not a slasher in the traditional sense, this groundbreaking thriller led the groundwork for a genre in ways that filmmakers would replicate for decades. Based on the novel by Robert Bloch, Psycho tells the story of Marion Crane, a secretary who steals money and checks into the eerie Bates Motel. What begins as a suspenseful crime drama takes a shocking turn when Marion is brutally murdered less than halfway through the film, a move that defied cinematic conventions. Hitchcock took a massive gamble with Psycho. He funded the film himself after Paramount refused to back it, shooting with a modest budget of $800,000. The shower scene, perhaps the most iconic moment in horror history, took 7 days to film, using 77 different camera angles. To this day, it's studied for its masterful editing and the ability to create terror without showing graphic violence. Psycho's success was unprecedented. It earned $50 million at the box office and broke taboos about sex, violence, and psychological horror. Norman Bates, with his disarming charm and terrifying duality, became the template for future slasher villains, a killer hidden behind a mask of normalcy.
We all go a little mad sometimes.
While Psycho paved the way for psychological horror, the next big influence came from across the Atlantic.
Questi film si fanno espressamente per il mercato americano. Facendoli per il mercato americano bisogna girarli con quella mentalità leggermente bambinesca, non dico per gli americani, che li rispetto molto, però hanno una mentalità bambinesca, loro vogliono quei film lì, vogliono il film del terrore, il castello, forse sarà perché saranno per i bambini, non lo so, ma loro vogliono questi, se gli propone una cosa intelligente è difficile che accetti.
In Italy, a subgenre of horror called giallo, named for its yellow-covered pulp novels that inspired them, was redefining murder mysteries. Directors like Mario Bava and Dario Argento blended mystery, gore, and style to create films that were as beautiful as they were terrifying. Mario Bava's Blood and Black Lace is often cited as one of the first prototype slashers. The film featured a mass killer targeting models in a fashion house. It focused on elaborate kills and had striking visuals. Bava's influence can be seen in the way that later slashers use color, camera movement, and suspense. Dario Argento took the genre further with films like The Bird in the Crystal Plumage and Deep Red, emphasizing the mystery of the killer's identity, a trope that became a staple in slashers. Giallo films also took the concept of the killer's POV and made it mainstream, immersing the audiences in the perspective of the killer. As the 1970s began, independent filmmakers in the United States were pushing the boundaries of horror with low-budget, high-impact films. Among them was Tobe Hooper, whose 1974 masterpiece, The Texas Chain Saw Massacre, forever changed the genre.
It was during a period of time in the country where we ran out of gas. And it was that gas shortage where people lined up, and so that Watergate was going down. There was a lot of political things that were just happening in the country that was inspired, that just helped fix the film. As I think what I was trying to say is, now this is America. This is my view right now. I should qualify it as American.
Hooper's film was made for just $140,000, but its impact was immeasurable. Inspired by real-life crimes like those of Ed Gein, the Texas Chain Saw Massacre followed a group of friends who fell victim to a family of cannibals in rural Texas. The film's raw documentary-style approach created an intensity that few films could match. Leatherface, the chainsaw-wielding killer, became a horror icon. Unlike the silent, emotional killers of later slashers, Leatherface was frantic, unpredictable, and disturbingly human. The film's use of implied violence showed little but suggested much, made it even more terrifying. By the mid-1970s, the pieces of the slasher formula were coming together. Films like Black Christmas, directed by Bob Clark, introduced the idea of a killer stalking victims in a single location. The film's use of the killer's POV and its unsettling phone calls were direct precursors to Halloween. Meanwhile, exploration films like The Last House on the Left and The Hills Have Eyes pushed the boundaries of violence and survival horror, showing how far filmmakers could go to shock and disturb audiences. These films weren't just about killers, they were about victims fighting back, a concept that would become central to the slasher genre. All roads led to Halloween, which took innovations of Psycho, giallo, and low-budget horror and redefined them into a masterpiece. With its unstoppable killer, suspenseful pacing, and groundbreaking score, Halloween was the culmination of everything the genre had been building towards. The birth of the slasher was not a singular event, but an evolution, a mix of innovation, cultural shifts, and fearless filmmakers willing to take risks.
What's the boogeyman?
As a matter of fact, it was.
From Psycho to Halloween, these early films led the foundation for a genre that would dominate horror for decades. As we conclude this journey through the history of slashers, one thing is clear. These films are more than just blood and screams. They reflect our fears, challenge our expectations, and remind us how much we love to get scared in the movie theaters. Slashers may have had their ups and downs, but they remain a vital part of horror. And as long as there are stories to tell, the killers in the shadows will always find a way to return. This has been Slashers Unmasked. Thank you so much for joining us on this blood-soaked journey through horror history. Until next time, stay safe and don't look behind you. Make sure to like and subscribe to never miss out on any content like this. This has been Rapid Review. See you at the movies.